this concept of brain biochemistry. How does the level of synaptic activity that occurs in your brain, how does that affect your mood and your mind and your mental health? Then when it comes to dealing with synaptic activity and treating synaptic activity, we're going to be dealing with nutritional and non-nutritional approaches to dealing with that. Nutritional and non-nutritional approaches, and then we're going to finish off with questions and answers. So it's going to be an action-packed evening tonight. So let's talk about the epidemic. We're all not too unfamiliar, isn't it? Mental health, it ravages our families, our cultures, our societies. It's one of the biggest causes of missed work time. It's one of the biggest burdens. In fact, I would say that it has caused more complications than COVID. I would say that mental health has caused more complications than COVID. And if our government paid just as much attention to the complications of mental health as it did to COVID, well, I reckon we would probably be a much more better place. We'll be much more equipped when it comes to prevention. But thankfully, we have this opportunity to talk about that. But yeah, there's not just, don't get me wrong, COVID has had terrible economic and terrible physical complications. But I would say mental health has eclipsed both of them. Mental health has eclipsed both of them combined. Now, do you know that half of you guys, one every second person, has suffered from major depression? Did you know that? 50%. That's staggering. That is staggering. And when it comes to generalized anxiety disorders, if you include ADHD, post-traumatic stress, obsessive-compulsive disorders, and social phobias combined, it's even more than that. It's even more than that. And that, it just boggles the mind how much of our society, how much we are plagued by this ill of mental conditions. And so much so that it's led to many challenges, including self-harm. A 2014 study showed that up to 26% of females engage in self-harm, and that's before COVID. So you can imagine what the numbers would be now. And a third of that number are men that engage in self-harm. So it's more women tend to engage in self-harm than men. But unfortunately, when it comes to men unfortunately take the cake when it comes to suicide. And that is a stigma, that is a silent issue that plagues our society that is not talked about. In fact, in Australia alone, 65,000 people attempt self-elimination in Australia. Do you know that? You know what that works out to be? That means 9 people every day succumb to suicide. Every day. Now, when it comes to even just the financial costs, I alluded to about the economic costs, the business costs as well. About $300,000 to $500,000 in lost income per average lifespan per person due to mental health alone. There was a statistic I saw that $500 billion of lost wealth in the economy due to mental health. That's staggering numbers. And that was before COVID. All these statistics I'm referring to is before COVID, and you can only imagine what it is now. Now, does anyone recognize this person? Anyone recognize this person? Anyone want to guess? I heard someone say. Isaac Newton? What about this person? Winston Churchill? Abraham Lincoln? Some of you are history buffs. What about this one? Van Gogh. Do you know what they all had in common? They all had either severe depression or had psychosis even, all of them. And this is really important that I wanted to highlight that is that mental health, even when it comes to severe conditions, like I'm talking about schizophrenia, depression, anxiety, the severe spectrum, even high-functioning people like them are victims of this condition. And it's also important to understand that there are many people that are walking around the street that you may never know are going through mental health issues. And they're functioning, they're going to work, they're the people that you meet at the gas station, they're the people that you meet at work, and they're put on a mask, and you'll never know that they're going through something severe. I think that's really crucial that even people that go through very severe illnesses like that can also still thrive and mask their condition. So yeah, that's really important. And we're not talking about, and that's also, there's this other category, the other spectrum, where sometimes you just wake up and you feel tired, you feel exhausted, you feel run down. Those are the aspects that we want to also talk about as well. Now, I want to get into the nitty-gritty now. Now, a lot of those characters that I showed you, they're all almost without uncertainty. They all had the genetic predisposition of what we call undermethylation. Now, I'm going to go into a little bit more detail. What is undermethylation? I'm going to introduce some new terms, so I want you guys to bear with me. But just undermethylation is related to lack of serotonin activity. Remember, tonight we're going to look at serotonin activity and how we can improve that, because we understand that serotonin is one of the key neurotransmitters that affects our mood. Let me tell you why. If you don't have serotonin, you're going to feel down, you're going to be more irritable, you're going to have insomnia. Some people also struggle with the category of insomnia. They wake up early. Have some of you guys experienced that, where you wake up early, you can't seem to get back to sleep? Yeah, that's part of this syndrome. You may have serotonin syndrome if you have those three things. And then if it progresses, you might have feelings of panic, feeling on edge. Like I mentioned before, high-functioning individuals, and this is very characteristics of undermethylators, which is a genetic predisposition. So some people are undermethylators, some people are overmethylators. Depending on if you tick a lot of these things, then you're most likely an undermethylator, okay? But so most people that are undermethylators, they tend to be very calm on the outside, but on the inside, they're very tense. And you never know unless you really probe or you know that person very well, but that's how they do. And they tend to ruminate. Do any of you guys experience that? You ruminate? You something that happened maybe 1 or 2 days ago, you're still thinking about it, you're still dwelling on it. That's very typical of an undermethylator. People that are undermethylators are more prone to addictive personalities. They're more impulsive. And they also have less frontal lobe function. They have frontal lobe depletion. Now, another way you can tell if you're an undermethylator is that if you tick a lot of these aspects, is that sometimes we can do a blood test called whole blood histamine. It's not a common test that we do, but in some specialized laboratories, if you have a histamine level greater than 70, then you're considered an undermethylator. That means you don't have enough serotonin right from the get-go. You're genetically predisposed to having low serotonin, which is the key neurotransmitter that helps you with your mood. So that's a key way that we can look at it. Now, what happens when you correct it? What happens when your serotonin improves? Well, here you go. This is what happens. This is the benefits of having better serotonin. You're easier to empathize with others. You become other-focused more than in-focus. You're better at managing emotions. People who are actually over-methylators, who are more creative, they tend to be more naturally artistic. They return to their artistic self. So that's more the over-methylator type, more musical, whereas the under-methylators, they're more like the STEM fields, science, technology. They're kind of like, more kind of focused in those areas rather than the artistic side. And also, they're better to hang around with. They're better to get along with. Wouldn't that be amazing to be in that situation? How many of you guys want to have that experience? We're going to talk about that tonight. Now, I want you guys to bear with me. We're going to go into a bit of neurochemistry here, okay? Now, what you see in that diagram is two neurons talking to each other, okay? So you have the top neuron, which if they receive an electrical activity, an electricity, they release substances such as serotonin, and they travel all the way to the other neuron, which is at the bottom, and there's like a lock and key, if you like, a lock and key. So if the serotonin matches the receptor, it activates the other neuron, and it has those effects like we just talked about. So that is essentially bare bones. And then if you notice, if on the edge of the diagram, see if I can point to it, just right here, those are the serotonin channels, reuptake channels. So they're like the vacuum cleaners. So this area in between the neurons, that's what we call the synaptic cleft. Now, what happens is that the reason why we have these channels there is because our body understands that we don't always produce enough serotonin, so it tries to conserve it for a rainy day, so to speak. So for lack of a better way of explaining it, it recycles it. Who believes in recycling here? The body does that. Do you know that? The body tries to recycle it. Now, what happened is that mainstream medicine has tried to exploit this. Okay? Mainstream medicine has tried to exploit it. So it all started early in the 1950s. They had some first-generation medications called monoamine oxidase inhibitors. A bit of a mouthful, but essentially what it does is that it tries to ensure that there's enough serotonin in that synaptic cleft. But the problem with those medications is that it actually was very risky. People who took those medications, they were more prone to malignant hypertension, and they ended up having stroke. So that's why when it first came out in the 1950s, they abolished it. Then we had these second-generation medications called SSRIs, which is the most popular medication on the market. Literally, out of all medications, one of the most popular medications. And basically, what it does, it prevents that recycling from happening. Because what happens is that if you recycle it, then you don't have enough of that serotonin and that synaptic cleft to go to the other neuron where it talks to each other. Are you guys following? So what happens is that the medication blocks that receptor, that vacuum cleaner, so that there's more of that serotonin available in abundance. It sounds good, right, in theory, but there's something fundamentally wrong with that, because you know what? It doesn't actually deal with the cause, right? Because what happened is that the cause, especially if you're already an undermethylator, if you're already someone that doesn't have enough serotonin, you don't actually, you're not actually producing serotonin. You're just simply trying to recycle what you have. So eventually, what happens is that it gets burnt out. You run out of serotonin, and then what happens is that you have to prescribe, more medications. You have to, try and mitigate that, and to make sure that you have that same effect, so to speak. So that's why nutritional and lifestyle is crucial, if not essential. Now, don't get me wrong, there is a role for medications, especially when it comes to severe depression. Like often when I was a GP registrar in Childers, I always say to my patients, look, I'm going to prescribe you this medication with the intention to wean you off it over the next few months. Okay? Now, the reason why is that I want the lifestyle changes to catch up so that eventually they don't need that medication, because it takes time. It takes time for those lifestyle changes to occur. So eventually what happens is that we can taper off those medications, and most of those patients say, look, I don't need it anymore, and then we gently wean them off. Isn't that amazing? So that's why nutrition and lifestyle is essential, and we're going to talk about some of those specifics right now. Okay, now, we talked about what it means to have adequate serotonin already. Now, this is a funny diagram. Don't get too scared of this diagram, okay? The world functions on cycles, right? We have the water cycle, nitrogen cycle. Your body has similar things, except it's in chemical form. Now, what happens is that when we talk about methylation, right? There are certain substances that allow serotonin to be produced in the first place. So some of the key things to be aware of is methionine, and then another molecule called SAM. So that SAM, in abbreviated form, donates a carbon, and that donation donates to that methyl acceptor, which forms the various different molecules that we see. It's involved in DNA, RNA, protein, as well as serotonin. Right? So it's just a complex process, but just know that there's a substrate, there's something that goes before serotonin that needs to be in abundance in order for serotonin to occur. So that includes things like methionine, that includes things like SAM, and then things like SOH is like a natural inhibitor of that process to keep it in balance. So everything, the body works around us as a balance, like an orchestra. It keeps everything in balance. It's all homeostasis to keep everything in check so you don't have too much or too little. So that, as I said, some of us are born with too little, some of us are born with too much. So the body tries to balance it out. So now, let's talk about dopamine. Dopamine is important for motivation and interest. Okay, what did I say dopamine is important for? Motivation and interest. Now, some people, if they don't have dopamine, they struggle to get out of bed. Have any of you guys been there before? I know I have. You just struggle. You're just like, do I really have to do this day 5 of 7 of the week? Do I really need to be doing this right now? And there may be that there's a lack of dopamine in your system. And people who don't have enough dopamine, the things that they used to find pleasurable, like a sunset, like reading a book, are no longer pleasurable. And also, they need super stimuli like screens, TV, media, grotesque scenes to produce that same dopamine hit. And that's a terrible unbalance to be in. You don't want to be in that situation. You don't want to be in that situation. And people that have dopamine, they're easily discouraged. They're not as resilient. They're not as resilient. So now we can check. If you tick any of those things, you may be someone that likes dopamine. We can also check biochemically by checking your copper levels. Again, it's a very nuanced test. It's not done significantly throughout medicine. But if you check your free copper levels and it's above 30%, or your copper to zinc level is high, then it's often an indication that you lack dopamine. Okay. Now, norepinephrine. Have any of you guys heard of norepinephrine? Norepinephrine. That's the cousin of adrenaline. All of you guys have heard of adrenaline, right? The thing that gets your heart racing. Norepinephrine, essentially a cousin. And people that if you don't have enough of that, you're easily tired. You're fatigued. It's an important neurotransmitter that helps you to focus. If you wonder why maybe the children aren't focusing, maybe it's because they don't have enough norepinephrine. Too much of it, on the other hand, leads to excessive worry. They're easily distracted, racing thoughts. All of those things may ring a bell. All of these things may ring true to you if you have too much norepinephrine. Also, if you have too little, you may have issues with sleep. Sometimes people sleep too much. So if you're the kind of person that ends up sleeping several hours, you don't wake up until 10, 11 the next day, that might be you. That might be you not having enough norepinephrine. And of course, it's linked to too much of it leads to weight loss, unintentional weight loss. I don't know if some of you guys have noticed, if some people, that you can tell someone is very stressed, if you notice that they lose a lot of weight. I'm very much like that. Like if I'm stressed, I just lose a lot of weight like nothing. So I'm personally very prone to that, and I have to be cautious that my norepinephrine levels is appropriate. Melatonin. Do you know that melatonin is a neurotransmitter? How many of you guys have heard of melatonin? Melatonin is a neurotransmitter, but we know that it's an important hormone for sleep, isn't it? It's an important hormone for sleep. So it also happens to be important for helping you experience pleasure. If you have enough melatonin, your ability to experience pleasure is healthier, and you're better able to manage stress. And we know that, therefore, sleep is going to be very important, isn't it? Sleep is very, very important, and it's important that we get the right kind of sleep. Now, GABA. GABA is unlike the other neurotransmitters that I've talked about. It's the calming neurotransmitter. All the other ones, they're more excitatory. This one is the calming neurotransmitter, to put it in simplistic terms. It calms the brain and it inhibits neurotransmission. It keeps all the other neurotransmitters in balance. It's like the overall check of all the other neurotransmitters. And therefore, it can help with anxiety. And you may notice that some patients, if they have an imbalance between GABA and all the other neurotransmitters, they're very prone to seizure-like activity. So it's interesting how they're all related in that sense. Now, what are the functions that deal with methylation? We've touched on a lot of it already. I won't go into a lot of detail, but methylation is a big deal. I want you guys to be aware of. If you forget anything else, just remember methylation, and that is the key process in your body that produces various neurotransmitters. So DNA and RNA synthesis, methylation plays a big role in that. Even nitric oxide production. Do you know what that's useful? That keeps your blood vessels nice and open. That keeps your blood vessels nice and healthy, dilates your blood vessels. Energy production, skeletal muscle contraction, it has a lot of function. So it's important that, whatever we talk about tonight that deals with methylation, you're going to be dealing with all these other things as well. It's all related. And that means that you're going to be healthy overall. So let's talk about methylation. I mentioned about SAM. Remember that funny cycle that I showed you, which is a precursor to having serotonin? SAM, if you want to make sure that you have enough of that SAM, studies have shown that we need to have enough of it to facilitate all those functions I just mentioned, like DNA function, neurotransmitters, etc. And often people that don't have enough of that often lack the presence of folate and vitamin B12. So if you don't have enough folate, if you don't have enough B12, then you're going to have reduced levels of SAM, which is the ingredient you need to make serotonin. So B12 and folate, and you can get your folate from green leafy vegetables, avocado, etc. And low-level studies have shown that low levels of SAM is associated with depression, dementia, liver disease, and vascular myelopathy. Isn't that incredible? See how crucial that is? See how crucial that is? Now, it is traditionally, have any of you guys heard of the molecule tryptophan? Tryptophan. Have you guys heard of tryptophan? Now, tryptophan is the key ingredient that allows you to produce serotonin. In the past, it used to be that people always focus on tryptophan, but I want to provide a more holistic view of this process. Now, tryptophan, people used to think that, most people, you may have heard that turkey, certain types of meats are very high in tryptophan. However, the problem with that is that tryptophan is a minority when it comes to the other amino acids. Well, what did I say, everyone? It is a minority. So there's so many other amino acids that make up these proteins. Often, if people think they'll get their tryptophan from turkey, for example, it'll get to their muscles, but what happens is that we need to get tryptophan into the brain. We need to get tryptophan into the brain. I'm just going to go backtrack a little bit, just so I'm not losing anyone. So, it's not very clear there, but if you look at the top of that diagram, tryptophan is one of the key steps in producing serotonin right at the top. So it's all interconnected, but just know that tryptophan is important when it comes to producing serotonin. But the question is, how do we get that in the brain? We don't want tryptophan to go in our... Yes, it's good to have it in our muscles, but we're talking about optimizing our mind here. How do we get tryptophan into the brain? We're going to be talking about that in a bit. So, like I said, it's the least abundant amino acid. Now, in order for tryptophan to get into the brain, we need to be careful of stress, insulin resistance. We need to make sure we have enough magnesium. We need to make sure that we have enough vitamin B6. And we also need to make sure that we have enough sunlight. So it turns out that sunlight is crucial in making sure that we get that tryptophan into the brain. Now, L-methionine, that was the other part of the equation in that cycle that I talked about, involved in the donation process of the methylation process. Now, L-methionine essentially allows SAM to be produced. It provides the final method group to produce serotonin, dopamine, and norepinephrine, which is all those stimulatory neurotransmitters that we talked about already. However, this is crucial to remember, too much methionine can actually shorten your life. Too much, so it's a balance, too much methionine. And often methionine, if you get that imbalance of too much when you eat a very high protein diet, mostly animal foods. And studies have shown that with those foods that have a high concentration of methionine increase the risk of cancer, and also does the opposite effect that you want, increases the risk of depression. So it's a fine balance. It's a fine balance. Now, let's go through the plant sources. So the sources of food that are too high are foods like fish, chicken, beef, and pork. They have L-methionine, all right, but it's in too high of quantities for it to be safe to consume. But here are the foods, the plant sources that are rich with L-methionine that are in appropriate quantities. Now, the recommended daily intake is 725 milligrams. So you're going to get foods like tahini, chia, in terms of the seed side of things, hemp seeds, Brazil nuts. And from the legumes and grain side of things, you want things like wheat is important. People, they say, there's a lot of controversy about wheat and gluten intolerance and things like that. Wheat actually is essential, especially in being a carrier of tryptophan, to get that tryptophan into the brain, into the blood-brain barrier. And so it has a double effect, a double benefit. Large navy beans, red kidney beans are all essential to have healthy balances of L-methionine. You can see the numbers there. Now, what happens when you have enough tryptophan? Tryptophan it shows you that studies have shown that it decreases quarrelsome behaviors. So people are more agreeable when they have enough. They're at risk of seasonal affective disorder. They're at risk of premenstrual dysphoria, insomnia, obstructive sleep apnea, and also helps people that have enough tryptophan are better able to overcome addictions like nicotine. They're more equipped to have the ability to deal with nicotine addiction. So it's many benefits. And we talk about that in stress-prone subjects. I mentioned about the importance of having carbohydrates in getting that tryptophan across the board, across the blood-brain barrier, so that you can, that way, studies have shown that people that have a lot of stress benefit from a lot with carbohydrates because that's a primary fuel that your brain likes to use. Now, so just to summarize, in terms of the depression diet, if you want to know what diet do I need to overcome depression, it's a plant-based diet. Because we talked about the challenges of a high-protein diet, that it can actually cause depression and it also has other risks. And also, the reason why that plant-based diet is advantageous is reduces inflammation. You don't have that arachidonic acid. That arachidonic acid, that cholesterol level, and therefore you're reducing your level of brain inflammation. And chronic inflammation is also associated with depression as well. So various things that modulate the serotonin include things like vitamin D and omega-3. So once you have this serotonin in your brain, there are certain substances that help modulate it to ensure that you get more bang for your buck, so to speak. So that includes omega-3 and vitamin D. And a lot of those omega-3s, they are usually from marine plants that you get it. But of course, they're not that easily accessible. So it turns out that if you want to get the plant variety, that it undergoes, for it to go through that conversion from the marine variety of omega-3 from the plant variety of omega-3 to the ones that are beneficial, you need vitamin B, 3 and 6, magnesium, zinc, and vitamin C. And also, it actually produces that brain fertilizer, BDNF. Have any of you guys heard of BDNF? That is the brain fertilizer that improves neuroplasticity. So you're getting a lot of benefit when you're getting high amounts of omega-3, especially the right type of omega-3, which is that DHA. Now, of course, these are the sources of omega-3, if you're interested, in terms of if you want to get that accurate modulation of your serotonin. Oatmeal, whole wheat, and then if you go towards the end, the big winners are chia and flax seeds. Of course, vitamin C, there's plenty of sources, plenty of plant sources. If you want to have really high concentrations, cherries is a really good source. Now, zinc, I mentioned zinc a lot. Now, zinc in and of itself, do you know that zinc can actually works just as well? 2 weeks of zinc, studies have shown 2 weeks of zinc supplementation increases your serotonin receptors and has shown to improve ADHD. Do you know that? Just zinc alone. So people or children with ADHD will potentially benefit from zinc supplementation. And so if you want to know where you get high amounts of zinc, baked beans, firm tofu from the legume side are big winners. Oats, again, is a recurring food. Hemp seeds, pumpkin seeds are another source of zinc. So zinc supplementation is a good way of treating ADHD, which is quite remarkable. Magnesium. Magnesium is a crucial role in terms of modulatory effect, as well as making sure that it plays a role in producing those neurotransmitters, particularly serotonin. We know that it increases serotonin levels. And therefore, they recommend that in order to get that magnesium level to optimize your serotonin, they recommend 500 milligrams 4 times a day. And that will help your methylation and also augment the other inhibitory neurotransmitters. So those are things like black beans, small white beans, firm tofu, which is a recurring food. And then oats, again, is another winner. And also special grains like buckwheat as well. So those are some of the sources of magnesium that you can get, that if you want to boost your serotonin, you're on your way to that if you consume magnesium. Now, let's go into some supplements. If you're looking at for some supplements that are non-traditional pharmaceutical, there's a lavender kind of like extract, which is marketed as Silexin, which has found to be an antidepressant, increases serotonin levels and extracellular brain serotonin levels. So there's some studies that have shown that demonstrated that it increases serotonin levels by supplementing with Silexin, and also saffron. So saffron, a 2018 meta-analysis showed that saffron was of comparable efficacy to traditional antidepressants without the side effects. Because you see, a lot of these antidepressants, they all have side effects. We talked about the first generation, which had a lot of these nasty side effects. They've done away with that now. But even the current generation ones, there's issues with sexual inhibition and all those different types of nasty side effects that people don't appreciate. Whereas a lot of these don't have the same side effect profile. They're found naturally in the environment. So those are the benefits of that, as well as the nutritional aspects. But like I said, I want to emphasize medications do play a role, especially when it comes to, I like to see it as a diagnostic tool, if anything. So if someone comes in, they have all these symptoms. Depression can come with all sorts of somatic symptoms as well. And sometimes they have some of the characteristics where you can't put your finger on it. Often you give them some mirtazapine or antidepressant, and you notice that their mood improves. So that at least you get a lot of feedback from that, and you realize, oh, actually we've identified the cause. This person is is sensitive to loss of serotonin, and therefore you can now augment that with lifestyle changes over time. So I think that's really important that we have a balance, but it's really awesome to see that there are some other approaches to treating this. Now, I want to look at non-nutritional approaches, just to finish off. Blue light therapy is shown to increase serotonin synthesis, improve mood, and improve social interaction, studies have shown. So you can get it either through a light box, a medical grade light box, or you can wear it as a wearable device. You can look online, just make sure that you get the medical grade version. What that does is that it ensures that you're getting enough melatonin, and that conversion of melatonin to serotonin as well is crucial in terms of ensuring that, if you're someone that is prone to, let's say you're a shift worker, or you're just having issues with your sleep, you could really benefit from something like this. Okay, and here's the specific details. It's often preferable is 450 to 490 nanometers of wavelength, which is the equivalent of looking at a blue sky. But not looking at the sun directly, obviously, but looking at the blue sky is the kind of the corresponding wavelength that blue light therapy matches, and is shown to have marked improvement in people's serotonin levels. Of course, exercise. Exercise is important in terms of like several studies have shown that exercise increases brain serotonin levels and activity in the hippocampus and frontal lobe. It increases the brain of the serotonin precursor tryptophan, like we talked about. So you're getting a lot of benefits with exercise in terms of shunting those substances into your body. And a large body of evidence is showing the idea that exercise helps with things like fatigue, increases plasma tryptophan, as mentioned, and also it reduces the inhibition of tryptophan. So you're getting a lot of benefit with exercise. Okay. Now, I want to talk about, to conclude, cognitive behavioral therapy. Now, all of these nutritional and non-nutritional methods are very nice and helpful, but there's also this concept that our thoughts impact our emotions and actions, but our actions also impact our emotions and thoughts, so vice versa. We need to attack it from both sides. Cognitive behavioral therapy is a gold standard of dealing with negative thought patterns. And there are so many highways that we've developed in our lives, isn't it, of our negative thought patterns that is brought upon by trauma, brought about of our negative self-esteem, etc. And we want to shut them down, right? We want to shut them down and create new pathways, new highways. And cognitive behavioral therapy, when done with a licensed psychologist, is very effective, even by itself. Very, very effective. So we want to make sure that we complete the whole package in terms of boosting that serotonin. Serotonin levels can change by the way you think as well. So chemically it can change. So it's very, very crucial that we're getting into that. And they say that realistically, the ratio of positive to negative thoughts should be 3-1. Negative positive to negative thoughts should be 3-1. Okay. And I really love this ancient text here, which it turns out that cognitive behavior therapy has been around for millennia. And this is an example of cognitive behavior therapy that was recommended to a local church. It says, finally, brothers and sisters, whatsoever is true, whatsoever is noble, whatsoever is right, whatsoever is pure, whatsoever is lovely, whatsoever is admirable, if there's anything is excellent or praiseworthy, think about such things. Isn't that amazing? There's cognitive behavioral therapy all the way back then, literally teaching people to have correct thought patterns. So this has been around for ages, and it's shown that it's stood the test of time. So I understand that, a lot of these things that we've talked about, it's hard to wrap your head around, isn't it? Like there's a lot of things to work on. And if you're living a busy life, you have a lot of things going on, and it's hard to kind of tackle all of these things together. Sometimes it's good to invest. We talked about the financial burden that mental health has had. I wonder if we took the approach of investing into our health in the same way that we invest in something important in our lives, like a house or a car, whatever, that's worth investing in, we will reap the benefits severalfold down the line. So one of my close friends, I call her Auntie Naomi, has got a health retreat at Harvey Range. So if you want to, to talk about that, if you want to come and kind of deal with these issues in a lump sum way, where you can give yourself a boost, this is a really good way to go about it, because it's a lot to deal with all at once. You can try and apply different things, but I think this is a really good way of tackling these issues in a way that is structured. You take your time, you're not busy, you dedicate that time for that, and people get a lot of benefits from that. So I hope you guys got a lot from it. Now it's time for questions. Feel free if you have any questions, any clarifications, some of those diagrams. Yeah. Oh. Absolutely. We've got like a good summary document at the front. So each of those got the salient points that we've talked about tonight. Yeah, my pleasure. My pleasure. There we go. So it's recorded as well. So we can give you the link towards the end of the series, and you can. Oh, the L-tryptophan is likely what you're referring to as L-tyrosine. L-tyrosine. So L-tyrosine is different. That's the precursor to the production of dopamine. So L-tyrosine is important for thyroid function. So that's why often patients that have low, like I said, they're apathy, they don't feel pleasure, or they struggle with their sleep. And often we'll do a battery of organic tests that includes thyroid, as well as the precursor. It turns out that it's related to those precursors like L-tyrosine. So yeah, that's a different substrate that leads to a different neurotransmitter.
What I want to find out, what is the normal sleep pattern? Like how many hours for a reasonable sleep? How many hours?
Yes. Yeah, so in terms of sleep, yeah, great question. So it varies. We tend to say 8 hours sleep is the gold standard. It's the magic number, so to speak. But everyone's also different. Some people thrive on 6 hours sleep. Some people thrive on 9 hours sleep. But I think the crucial thing is that we get that sleep several hours before midnight. That's when you're likely to get into that deep sleep, the more restful, restorative sleep. So you could be having, if let's say you're sleeping for 6 hours, but if the majority of those hours are before midnight, which is where you're getting that peak, melatonin, you're getting that deep level of sleep, you're going to be more restful when you wake up. So yes, quantity is important. 8 hours, I would say, is a good number to aim for, but everyone's body is different. So just see whatever works for you.
This is different in older. Like as you get older, people say, oh, you don't need as much sleep. Maybe 4 to 6 hours.
Yeah, I don't know about that, to be honest. I don't know about that. I think it's a bit of a misnomer, I think. Like, I would say still strive for the 8 hours. It is, there may be an element of, how much physical activity people are doing, how much of a recharge you need for your body, so that, you will tend to want to have more restful sleep to facilitate the activities during the day. But for overall optimum health, I still recommend that 8 hours, no matter what age. Mm. Yeah, I think melatonin is really good. Yeah, melatonin, magnesium is a good supplement. So those are known to help with sleep. So I would say, especially in that over 60 range, I highly recommend melatonin, 6 milligrams. Take it around 5 p.m. But also you can get it from nutrition as well. Eat consuming a lot of oats, some of those foods that we mentioned. That will help with boosting that melatonin level. Thank you. Yeah. Sorry. Oh, you're good.
I jumped the gun. My question was, under methylation, the test for it. What was that called again?
So under methylation, so the test for it, so it's just show you. Histamine. So whole blood histamine is the test that we do.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Alright, you talked about the benefits of eating oats. I used to eat a lot of oats and I had problems. And I was just reading about it, and sometimes oats can cause other disease, like consuming a lot of oats, for example, celiac disease or gastrointestinal disorders. Is there any other food that could replace oats?
Absolutely. I'll show you the table there because there's quite a repertoire. Like I said, oats came up a lot in the tables that we looked at. So just show you some examples because there's just so many to keep track of. So yeah, so even things like, if you want to get omega-3, I know a lot of people, they consume oats mostly for the magnesium content. So if you want to get it from omega-3, they're even higher sources than oats here. So you can get chia, flaxseed is a good alternative. Red bell peppers, kale are better sources for that. So it depends on what, if you're thinking of it as an alternative grain, there are alternative grains, but if you're thinking of getting the specific nutrient that you're looking for, there are other ways to get it. Like zinc, if you want to get more zinc to help that regulation of serotonin. There are other things as well, like pumpkin seeds. But again, it may not serve as a good replacement for a cereal per se, but you kind of have to treat it almost like a medicine. So if the oats is causing like gastrointestinal issues, then I would, not continue to consume that and see what you want to get from that nutrient, what particular nutrients you're looking for. And there's several different sources to play with. So if you want an alternative grain, you can look at like quinoa as a good alternative source. It may not, it may not have the same nutrient density, but it's a good place to start in terms of having an alternative grain. Yeah, like I said, like a lot of the marine sources, like this, the thing with sardine is that the fish, they get the omega-3 from other life forms, from plants or what they consume in the ocean. So yes, it's got omega-3, also calcium as well with the bones. But like I said, with the methionine content, like if it's in an imbalance, it can also technically, because it's an animal source, increase your risk of other things. But having said that, a lot of the people who live on a Mediterranean diet have prospered really well on that. But I would just say that there are probably even better options than sardines. Any other questions? Okay, I think that's it. All right, thank you guys. I look forward to seeing you guys tomorrow night, dealing with digital media and the brain. You don't want to miss that. Bring your children along. It's going to be very, very insightful. Okay, thank you. Thank you.